I still can't get over the horror of what happened to me not so long ago. I have never seen such a thing in my life, and I would never think that it could really happen to an ordinary person. But it happened. It made me believe that people can turn gray from fear, because today, looking in the mirror, I found a lock of gray hair on my head. Those events have changed my life and my perception of life. Now, I want to tell you what was happening to me during the last few days. I want to warn at least someone against it. Otherwise, the same thing may happen that happened last night at my house. I will try to tell you everything in detail. Please don't be too hard on me. I'm not a master of artistic words, but I'll do my best. My name is Alex. I've spent my entire life in a small town, just a stone throws away from a big restless city. I am 24 years old, and perhaps that's all I can tell you about myself. Oh, one more thing. I work as an administrator in a small cafe in the center of the city. Now, that's it for sure. It just so happened that I've never been popular with the opposite sex. I'm a common young guy, not ugly as a boogeyman or something, but still, I have problems with girls. Of course, there were several girlfriends with whom I already planned a wedding almost at the second meeting, but alas, they broke it off with me very soon. Maybe something was wrong with me. I don't know, but I know for sure that each of them was happy to escape that relationship. Yes, I'm shy. I may be boring at some dialogue over a cup of coffee. I have my own demons in my head, like any other person in our society. Probably they just weren't interested in me, because nowadays, everybody needs prospects, money, success, and good housing. However, all I had was my grandfather's flat and a job in a cafe. Probably this can hardly be called a success. Well, not long ago, just a week ago, maybe a little more, I met a young lady. Our acquaintance was extremely strange. In the evening, I was walking home very tired after a banquet, or rather a wedding, where the guest forced me to drink with them. Well, it so happened that that day I was both tired and a little drunk. Moreover, I was incredibly sleepy. As I lived not so far from my job, I decided to take a walk home. Usually, it takes me only an hour and a half to get there, so I put on my headphones, turned on the music, and enjoyed myself. Suddenly, I noticed a girl sitting on a bench. She was crying, hiding her face with her hands. I looked around. There was no one at all. Not a single living soul. So, of course, I couldn't pass by. I approached her and asked her probably the most stupid question in such a situation. "Are you alright?" Instead of answering, she just spread her hands and looked at me like I was an idiot. At that moment, I saw her tear-stained face, and despite the running mascara, I noticed how beautiful she was. I was sure that I had no chances with such a girl, but I was obliged to help her. If I were sober, I would pass by without noticing her, but in this case, do you need any help? Are you feeling ill? "Me?" she replied. "Definitely not me," I answered with a smile, then sat down on the bench next to her and repeated my question. "Please forgive me if I'm intruding. I can leave if you say so." "No, you aren't intruding," she spoke softly, and then reluctantly told her situation and the reason why she was sitting here so late in the night, crying. From her story, I realized that she had a huge fight with her parents and was kicked out of the house. I found out the reason for this quarrel, but a little later. Of course, she didn't tell me the most important things, but it was okay. I also wouldn't dump all my troubles on a person I don't know. However, in a few minutes, she told me that her name was Jennifer, and damn it, she was so beautiful. I can't even put it into words. After her story, I certainly sympathized. realizing that a quarrel with parents was only short-term trouble, nothing more. Nevertheless, just after an hour of pity and sympathy, our conversation became much more pleasant. We started telling each other about ourselves, joking and even laughing. From this, I concluded that she was interested in me or something. I took her home early in the morning, and she even gave me her phone number without me asking. I can't even tell you how good it made me feel. I didn't even think about it at all. It's a really rare case that a girl who just met a guy just gives him her phone number. But when she went to the entrance and even kissed me on the cheek, well, it already gave me a reason to think about something more. Her lips, for some reason, were very cold. I was even covered with goosebumps. But all this was attributed to the cold night and the fact that I hadn't had a girlfriend for a long time. Well, after I walked home, or rather, I would even say flitted, naturally, there was no trace of alcohol left, but my mood was at its height. I was thinking only about her, and there were no other thoughts in my head. Naturally, I couldn't fall asleep at home either. I suppose many of you know this feeling. I couldn't sleep until the time when I had to go to work. Of course, I couldn't do my job, not only because of the lack of sleep at night, but also because of my daydreaming. I couldn't even think about going to the hall and taking an order or solving a dispute between a waiter and a guest about a hair in the soup. I called her the next day. She was very happy to hear from me. We talked a little, and I suggested going somewhere for coffee with croissants. She gladly agreed, and I couldn't wait for that day. The working day seemed to be very long, but finally, it ended. The following day was a day off, a very special day off. I went home thinking about it, and fell asleep with the same thought. To cut the long story short, I was preparing for a date, washing and shaving since the very morning. I even had to go to the store and buy some new clothes, because, frankly speaking, I looked like a homeless person. And then the evening came, and the time of the meeting was rapidly approaching. I bought a box of Raffaello and called a taxi. She looked amazing without tears, and with makeup. I couldn't find any other words to describe her. For some reason, some doubts came into my head during the last 2 days. Damn, I thought that it couldn't be the truth. I can't be so lucky and so on. I'm very self-critical in this regard. But as soon as I looked at her, all the negative thoughts disappeared. This evening was just fine. We had coffee, walked down the street. Luckily, it was much warmer than last night. Neither I nor she wasn't silent for a single second, and we learned a lot about each other. I was happy at that moment, and nothing could have dampened my mood that night. When it was time to leave, I took her home. We sat for another 20 minutes near the entrance, but then she went home, again kissing me on the cheek. Her lips weren't as cold as they had been last time. We walked like that for another week, and everything happened by itself. We started dating and literally spent all our free time together, and that's when I noticed that she was a little strange. This was manifested in minor things. For example, she was sometimes afraid of bright light for some reason. A strange phobia, of course. When we were at home, I even had to change all the light bulbs in the apartment to dimmer ones, just to make her feel comfortable. Recently, she took a shower at my house. I went to the bathroom after her and opened the tap. The water was boiling hot. I couldn't even touch it, but she managed to take a shower. When I asked her about it, she answered with her sweet smile that she liked slightly warm water. I didn't pay much attention to these oddities. I paid absolutely no attention to her peculiarities. We even stayed together for a few days, and you can imagine what was going on in the bedroom. Everything was just gorgeous. She had overshadowed my mind to the point that I hadn't noticed anything that was happening around me lately. It wasn't normal anymore. I knew that, but it was like she had charmed me, and there was nothing I could do about it. Even though it seemed like everything was perfect, but I felt like something was wrong. She was spending most of her time at my flat. Oh, come on, she literally had moved into it. But for the first sight, you would never say so. Normally when couples start living together, Boys get acquainted with dozens of new things that are usually unknown to the male sex. Huge mountains of all kinds of cosmetics appear all over the apartment, especially in the bathroom. Girls' clothes displace from the closet everything that was there before her arrival, but it has nothing in common with my case. She had been living at my place for a week and regularly visited her parents, but all this time she behaved extremely modestly, like a guest. Sometimes she took a shower, and sometimes she cooked something quietly in the kitchen, but these oddities began to bother me a little, as I noticed them quite often lately. A few days ago, she started walking around the apartment at night. Of course, I've heard something about sleepwalking and all that stuff, but it had started just recently. Sometimes I woke up at night and realized that there was no one in bed with me, and I heard shuffling footsteps from the corridor, first going to the kitchen, then to the living room, and then back to the bedroom. It was from that evening when I noticed that she wandered around my apartment at night for no reason, and I suspected something was wrong. At first, as I said earlier, I thought that she was just a sleepwalker, but once I tried not to sleep until the moment when she got out of bed. This actually happened every day, so she got up and went to the hall and I followed her. As far as I know, it's better not to wake up sleepwalkers, but she seemed to feel me from behind, turned sharply, and jumped back in fright.
My God, you scared me, honey.
Where are you going? I asked, confusedly.
To the toilet,
Jen replied suspiciously. Ah, well, I'll be waiting for you in the bedroom. Feeling like a fool, I headed back. Maybe she has some health problems that make her go to the toilet every night, and she's still too shy to say that. This night passed quietly, although I felt that she got up more than once. It was the day before yesterday, but yesterday, everything changed completely. She woke up in a bad mood, dressed up, washed her face, told me that she was going to visit her parents, and left the flat. Something was wrong. I saw it and felt it. When she left the house, something changed inside me, and I somehow began to feel better. I can't explain it. Honestly, even though I fell head over heels in love with her, like a youngster, but everything was strange. I've never felt that way. I mean, that bad. The horror that I mentioned at the beginning happened that night, but I began to suspect something during the day. When I went into the bathroom, I found a broken mirror and wisps of her thick black hair all over the bath. What was she doing here? I asked myself a logical question. And why the hell had she broken the mirror? Then that strange escape. Maybe something has happened. No idea. Bad mood? Maybe because of last night. Or perhaps there are some problems with her parents again. That's for sure. I picked up all the pieces of the mirror, swept them up, and threw them in the trash. After that, I went through the usual routine, just as any other weekend. I just lay at home, watched TV, sometimes played on the computer, and even read a book, which is extremely rare. It was almost 10 p.m. when the doorbell rang. I was happy as a puppy when I opened the door and Jennifer entered the apartment with a smile on her face.
How are you doing here without me?
She asked, smiling. I'm fine. And why are you so cheerful?
Oh, I visited my parents and told them about you. They can't wait to meet you.
Wow, really? Well, we can visit them next weekend.
Hey.
She came up to me and gently ran her ice-cold hand down my neck and looked right into my soul. Damn. And I looked at her as a scared little dog.
Let's go to the bedroom.
She smiled. That's how you do it? I said with a malicious smile. Well, why not? I picked her up and brought her to the bedroom. It's quite obvious what we were doing there, but that was just the beginning, and all that happened after can't be explained by any words. We finished doing very exciting things, and then we watched some of her TV shows for a couple of hours. It was already pitch dark in the street, so I fell asleep during the watching of the series. My sleep didn't last long, for the simple reason that the creak of my far from brand new bed gave out that Jen was probably going to the toilet again. I was already used to it, and I didn't pay much attention, but I did pay it to another thing. The TV was still working in the room. Maybe she fell asleep too and just forgot to turn it off, so the room was half lit. Jen got up from bed, wearing only a light nightgown, and then I noticed that something had fallen off right from under the nightgown. I was stunned when I understood that the mass was moving. I was asleep until this moment, but now the drowsiness was gone. I decided to wait, lay down, and understood that something was tickling my feet under the blanket. I quietly turned on the flashlight on the phone and realized that those were worms. There was a huge dark red spot all over the bed, and that spot was crawling with worms. I jumped out of bed and stood there like a fool. I could hear my heart beating fast, and in the stillness of the night, I could also hear shuffling footsteps somewhere in the hall. I shone my flashlight on what fell out of her when she got out of bed. Those were worms too. Nasty. Crawling in some kind of slime. The sight of it made me sick to my stomach. I walked on after her. There were no more shuffling footsteps, but there was the sound of running water in the bathroom. Still, the light was off. I went closer to the bathroom, put my ear to the door, though I heard nothing but the sound of gurgling water. My hands were trembling after what I saw in bed, so it was hard for me to open the door. I tried again and again, but it was locked. I began to pull the handle, and in a split second, something hit the door from the other side. I jumped back with fright, and then my curiosity and incredible anxiety in my heart got the better of my mind, and I lay down on the floor. I would look through the gap under the door to see what was happening there. Well, and at least try to see, because the light was turned off there, and only then a brilliant idea came to my head. I got up from the floor and turned on the light, and just as I did, there was a squeal outside the door that made my ears pop. I had to break down the door, otherwise I would never have known what was going on there. I wish I hadn't done it. I saw the maggots falling out of her, knew that she was afraid of the light, and broke mirrors, but I decided to see what was happening behind that door. It was a foolish decision, wasn't it? In a split second, all these facts came into my mind that I didn't want to notice during all this time that I knew her. It dawned on me that I didn't understand who she was at all. I broke down the door, and what I found in the bathroom defies any explanation. What I saw made me break out in a sweat. My hands trembled even more. I staggered back, tripped over the broken door, and fell, not taking my eyes off what was sitting in the tub. The room turned into the sweating room. It was insanely hot there. The steam from the boiling water was everywhere. The water temperature was noticeably different from the one she usually took a shower at my place with. The water was pouring into the tub, filling it more and more, and Jennifer was sitting in it, but it was no longer my girlfriend. It was no longer the girl I fell in love with at first sight. It was a real monster. I don't know what was happening to her, but she was sitting in this boiling water. Layers of skin had already begun to peel off from her body. She was covered with incredible burns. The water was red, apparently from the blood that flowed from everywhere, especially from the places where the skin had peeled off. The face was no longer what I was used to seeing, and there wasn't much left of it. It was all scratched, with the same skin peeling off and falling in huge flaps into the water. And she also peeled them off on purpose. I couldn't believe my eyes then. Well, can you imagine seeing such a scene? This was just some kind of nightmare. It became even more terrible when she raised her hands from the almost boiling water and began to pull out hair from her head, and those in turn very easily came off along with pieces of skin. Now the blood was pouring from her head, and I couldn't bear to look at it. And finally, I struggled to my feet and rushed into the room. I had to put something on and get the hell out of there. So I did. It was freezing cold on the street. I quickly threw on a t-shirt and pants, grabbed the phone and the keys from the nightstand, and ran down the corridor when I caught her out of the corner of my eye. Bloody wounds were all over her body. I even saw bones in some places. I'm pretty sure that any person with such burns wouldn't have survived. It's just impossible. However, she was getting out of the tub. I couldn't watch it anymore, so I ran out of the flat and then out of the building. I've been running like never before. I don't know what the source of my power was, probably just an adrenaline rush, but as I ran out of the entrance, the devil in my head made me turn and look at my window. I can't say for sure, but it seemed to me that I saw her standing in my kitchen. I don't know. Maybe it was just my imagination. Or maybe not. I ran all the way to the cafe where I worked. I spent the night there. The caretaker let me in for a bottle of beer. At first, in the morning, everyone thought that I came to work, but then noticed a terrible tear in my hands and, what was even more obvious, a lock of gray hair on my head. I had to lie that I knew nothing. Everything was fine. I didn't see anything, and I didn't hear anything. That night, I reluctantly went home. The terrible picture of the night before was still standing in front of my eyes. Although I managed not to think about it, a little while I worked all day. Cautiously, I entered the entrance and slowly climbed to my floor. The door lock was still open. In the heat of my escape, I didn't even think about closing it. I went into the flat. There was no one inside, except for that scattered dark hair, patches of skin, and the cold red water in the bathroom. I tried to force myself to stay here for the night. I had to take time off work to spend the following day cleaning up all this stuff, but everything I saw with my own eyes turned out to be the most terrible thing. A woman came to see me this afternoon. She was an ordinary woman of 40 to 50 years old. She rang the doorbell very insistently. Well, I thought that maybe she was some kind of payment document, but as it turned out later, she was her mom, Jennifer's mother, whom she really wanted me to meet.
She died 3 years ago.
Her mother told me in a monotone over a cup of hot tea.
She got pregnant early from a moron from uni. Well, of course, we were against all this, constantly quarreled. One day we went to work with her father, and when we arrived in the evening, we found our daughter dead in the bathroom. She committed suicide.
The woman began to cry, and I tried to calm her down.
Apparently, God cursed her to visit us from time to time.
I don't understand. How do you know that? How did you find me?
I work in the police station as a cleaner, so I asked my colleagues to run through the database to find your address. I just wanted to warn you, but I suppose I'm too late. After all, she visited us yesterday. She came in the evening. My husband and I almost gave our souls to God when we heard the water running by itself in the bathroom. She was like a living person, saying that she met a nice guy.
And I sit there and just being shocked by her story. It's only now that I've really realized what happened. All this time, I was living with a corpse, sleeping with a corpse, even fucking a corpse. I almost threw up at the table. The woman couldn't believe what she was saying, and neither could I. But it was real, and yesterday was the date of her death. My final advice would be to never, ever meet anyone on the street, especially at night. You never know who or what your companion may be.